Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome here at Crypto Hash Review, where we disseminate and we educate about Bitcoin and how it can help you as a Muslim. So, we discussed the history of money. We mentioned how our current system works, which is based on debt, on riba. And now I want to introduce to you the beginnings of Bitcoin. This happened during 2008. No one really knows if Bitcoin was in the what it was being planned before 2008. What we do know is that the building blocks of how Bitcoin works, which I'll describe in future videos, already existed from the 90s and the 80s and the noughties. But putting these pieces together to what is now known today as Bitcoin that occurred in 2008 by a person or a group of people we don't really know called Satoshi Nakamoto. They went on a public forum, put forward a proposal for Bitcoin, and I want to just briefly talk about why. What was the motivation, according to them at least, why they put forward this proposal of Bitcoin? And it comes down to what we just described earlier on about our current monetary system based on banking. So at that particular time in 2008, there was a massive collapse in the economy that was almost, you could say, the end. The government managed to kick the can down the road to delay the inevitable of the system collapsing. The details of why it collapsed, what led to its collapse, we mentioned in greater detail on our website. But needless to say, it was the constant compounding of loan giving and defaulting and rewrapping and so on and so forth. And it got to a point where it was about to end. It was about to collapse. And the governments had to step in and take drastic measures to help save the system. And those drastic measures resulted in the direct printing of more money and handing it over to banks directly to help bail them out of their default. So you can almost say that if someone has a debt and they can't pay back their debts, they default in their debt. And what's happened in their system was that it was causing there was a high risk of a cascading effect. If one defaults, another bank would default. Another bank defaults, and all these other banks would eventually default. Because remember, the whole system is built upon borrowing and lending and interest. So if a few key players collapse because they owe money to others and then they collapse and so on and so forth. So there was a big bailout. Billions and billions and billions of dollars was printed and given to big companies and banks. And this was essentially what angered, upset the Satoshi Nakamoto, him or his team, and they put forward a system that essentially was outside of this ecosystem, the ecosystem of borrowing and money lending. So what were the attributes of the current system that they were not happy with? And then we'll talk about what they felt they should do about it. Remember, this is just looking at it from the outside, what they felt was the issue and how they felt they would address it. So the first issue they had was the current system didn't have a cap on how much money was printed. So they just literally printed billions of dollars and just gave it to the bank, just gave it to them. Now you could say dilute the current money supply more than it already does anyway on a yearly basis. So the current system doesn't have a cap or a higher limit as to what the total amount will be. It can keep on diluting and diluting and diluting until there's nothing much left. Even if you look at the historical value of the dollar from the early 1900s, it's lost about 97% or something of its value. The second one is what's called the Cantillon effect. Now, Cantillon effect basically means where when you have the money printer, now this is interesting, the money printer or the furnace, this has been the case from not just our current system, but even the older system. And even when the Lydians they diluted their gold coins or whatever the case may be, what was paper certificates. The point is, whoever controls the printing of money essentially gives that newly fresh printed money to their friends or those who are closest to the printing press. That essentially means the rich. So those who are in need of money, the poor, they're too far away. The money doesn't get trickled down to them until way down the line if they even get anything. But those who get the freshly printed coins happens to be the banks and the big companies and CEOs and so on and so forth. So that's called the Cantillon effect. When you have a system of where central bodies control the printing of money, when the money is printed, it generally goes to those who are closest to it, the richest. Also, the current system removes, you could say, work from the equation. And in a way, it doesn't remove work. Okay, let me explain. Initially, to get money, you had to work for it. Go to the mountain, mine the ore, smelt the ore, change that gold into a coin. You had to work beforehand to now produce this monetary unit of account. So therefore, you can say this unit of account was worth the work I put into it. Whereas our current system, I can now invent money, I can print off the money before the work even existed. On the theory that you would pay it back, I guess. So I guess you're issuing money before you worked for it. Whereas historically, we always worked for it before you printed it, before you got the money. So that was our current system. Also, as I mentioned before, the whole purpose of a central bank is to allow governments and those in charge of the economy to be in charge of the economy, to manipulate, to inflate, to deflate, to push forward, to withdraw, to have our hand in the economy, to interfere with the economy, good or bad. What the point is to interfere. Now, this point here is not something that Satoshi mentioned, but it's just an observation. Our current system does or is based upon a riba or interest. The money comes into existence through money lending, through riba. Also, our current system highly depends upon banks. If every bank on planet Earth was to disappear off the face of the earth, you wouldn't have our current system anymore. It would disappear. Our current system wouldn't exist. Money wouldn't mean anything. It would be meaningless. So our current system is intrinsically attached to the banking system. And I guess it's probably why many Muslim countries, as much as they try to lean towards Islam or to be Islamic, and in the sense of monetary system, and to not have riba banks, if our money system is based on that, it's a bit hard to avoid that. Not making excuses, I'm just an observation, a potential observation, maybe what it is. So to compete with this, Satoshi Nakamoto put forward a system that does the opposite of what we just mentioned. So in our current system, where we have a flexible supply, which generally tends to mean that supply goes up and up and up. It can go down a bit, but generally it goes up. Whereas Bitcoin has a fixed supply. It is that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, and that's it. So everyone knows on planet Earth, there will never be more than that. That's something we can know right now, and it will always be the case. There's a fixed supply. You could plan for it. Whereas our current system, you can't plan for how much money there will be in the next 5 to 10 years, not even the next couple of months. Bitcoin is issued only to those who actually do work for it, to those who maintain the system. So miners who maintain the system, who take transactions and put it into the blockchain and do work to do so, they are rewarded with Bitcoin. So therefore, the issue of the Cantillon effect, where those who are printing the money go to those who already are closer to the printing press, doesn't occur here. It goes only to those who take part in it. Anyone can take part in mining Bitcoin. You don't have to get permission from anyone. You just have the hardware and start mining. Also, the value of Bitcoin comes from the work done on that Bitcoin. It's hard to explain at the moment, but for the sake of argument, because we haven't spoken about what mining is yet. But essentially speaking, there's a correlation between the value attached to Bitcoin and the amount of effort it takes to mine it. So there's a correlation between effort and its value. Whereas our current system, £10 is £10 because they say it's £10, generally speaking. If Bitcoin, you are your own bank. You don't need to trust anyone to hold your money. You can hold money and obscene amounts of money in your own account, you could say. There's no more need with Bitcoin for centralized bodies. It doesn't mean there will never be centralized bodies. We already have exchanges, but there's no need for them intrinsically as part of the system. Now, so like I said before, Satoshi doesn't eliminate, or his plan wasn't to eliminate riba per se, because that wasn't necessary. It's not exactly a Muslim to say, yeah, riba is haram. But as a byproduct of Bitcoin being, you could say, created or comes into existence through mining, therefore it has been detached from the concept of coming into existence through riba, for interest. So that's another win for the Muslim. Also, Bitcoin is free from any government or individual control. No one can say, I want Bitcoin to be this price. I'm going to set the rates and it's going to be this price. There's no rate setting. There's no interest rate setting. It can't happen. You may try to influence the price of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is its own thing. It can't be made to be something by any individual or groups of individuals, unlike fiat money to some degree. This is what was put forward as a proposal, as an idea in 2008. In 2009, Bitcoin, the program was coded and launched. The network was launched in 2009. The first Bitcoin transaction from one person to the other took place shortly after launch in January 2009. In 2010, so 2009, in 2010, the first known transaction of Bitcoin for something else, first actual trade took place, which was pizza, took place in 2009. In 2011, when there's a big hoo-ha, I don't know if you remember, when WikiLeaks revealed secret documents from the American government, and the American government forced the banks to shut down the accounts for WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks was forced to use Bitcoin because Bitcoin could not be shut down. So although they lost their money that was held in the banks, which was their money, by the way, whether you agree with what they did or they don't agree, their money is their money. But they were forced, you could say, to look for alternative avenues to store their money, and it came up with being Bitcoin. 2016, Bitcoin became legal tender in Japan, so we're moving forward. And we have now today, from 2009 to 2021, tomorrow, where Bitcoin has gone from having a value of nothing to now $30,000. So this is a brief intro as to Bitcoin and the history of Bitcoin. In our next video, we're going to discuss the unique selling points of Bitcoin and what kind of benefits are proposed to be given to mankind from Bitcoin. Jazakallah khair for listening to our video. Subscribe, like, and share this video. Join our mailing list, and if you want to give us a shout out, give us a chat to us, please go to our website. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.